So today, you are waking up to a world where the United States is pouring over $250 billion into this massive AI arms race.
Right.
And at the exact same time, you've got an autonomous AI model in a lab somewhere, independently figuring out how to hack every major operating system on Earth.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah, completely wild. And yet, across the country, public schools are reacting to all of this by literally ripping iPads out of the hands of kindergartners.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
It is. When you look at the massive stack of intelligence and news briefings for today, Tuesday, April 14th, 2026, you realize none of these events are happening in a vacuum. So welcome to this deep dive. We are here to figure out what is really going on behind the headlines.
Exactly. Our mission today is to, bring you into the room with us, sort through all this noise, and really make sense of these huge systemic shifts.
Right, because we are looking at major geopolitical shockwaves, autonomous AI acting like rogue hackers, and just this profound whiplash in our education system.
Yeah, and if you try to view these briefings as like separate piles of news, you completely miss the bigger picture. The necessary lens for our deep dive today has to be interconnectedness. Because the lines between foreign policy, infrastructure, and technology, they've just dissolved. They are quite literally the exact same story now.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the macro-level global events unfolding right now are just staggering. And we need to show you exactly how a crisis on the other side of the planet dictates the future of the global tech economy.
Right.
But before we look at these geopolitical events, we want to make something absolutely clear to you, the listener. Our role here is to bring you the facts from these morning briefings with strict neutrality.
100%.
We are not endorsing any political viewpoint today. So whether we're discussing the U.S. naval blockade, the policies of J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, or Viktor Orban's election defeat, we are simply retorting the geopolitical realities on the ground so you have the whole picture.
And that picture is incredibly volatile right now. The most immediate shockwave is obviously in the Middle East. As of yesterday, the United States has officially begun enforcing a naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
Wow.
Yeah. This is a direct consequence of the weekend's events in Islamabad, where face-to-face peace talks between Vice President J.D. Vance and Iranian negotiators just completely collapsed.
And the response from the administration was immediate and severe. President Trump has directed the U.S. Navy to seek out and interdict any vessel that attempts to pay an Iranian toll to transit the strait.
Which is a massive escalation.
It is. We are talking about explicit orders to sink ships that approach or challenge the blockade. And, this hardline stance is already creating major friction with key allies.
Right, because British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has publicly declined to join the American blockade.
Yeah.
Instead, the UK and France are they're attempting to organize their own separate multinational mission just to keep the commercial shipping lanes functioning.
And the fallout in the energy sector was just instantaneous, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. By Sunday night, Brent crude oil topped $100 a barrel.
Jeez.
To put that in perspective for you, that is a 40% price spike since this conflict began just 44 days ago.
That is insane. And while the Middle East is dominating the energy markets, the political map of Europe experienced like a massive earthquake of its own.
It really did.
After 16 years in power, Viktor Orban has conceded defeat in Hungary's national elections.
Yeah, and it's difficult to overstate how significant a shift this is for the European Union. Peter Magyar's center-right Tisza party didn't just win. They dominated.
Right. They secured 138 out of the 199 parliamentary seats.
Exactly, taking 53.6% of the vote with a record-breaking 79% voter turnout.
Wow.
Yeah, it gave them a two-thirds supermajority. So they actually possess the legislative power to unilaterally amend the Hungarian constitution.
And the financial floodgates are opening as a result of this. The briefings note that Magyar's victory is expected to immediately unblock a €90 billion EU loan package meant for Ukraine.
Right. It's a complete reversal of Hungary's recent adversarial posture inside the European Union.
Yeah. And then layering onto all this global instability, the briefings detail a really devastating situation in Haiti.
Yeah, this was tough to read. 25 people were killed and dozens more injured in a deadly stampede at a mountaintop fortress in northern Haiti.
Which is just a profound human tragedy, especially given the location. That fortress is a major tourist site.
Right.
And the intelligence briefing specifically notes that this incident highlights the deeply entrenched gang violence and political instability that is once again suffocating a tourism sector there that had just barely started to rebound.
Yeah. So if you step back and look at these three events, Hormuz, Hungary, and Haiti, you really start to see the hidden wiring of the global economy. A tragedy in Haiti shows how fragile stabilization efforts are in developing nations, which disrupts shipping and regional investment. Meanwhile, the Strait of Hormuz handles 20% of the world's global oil.
Which is a huge chunk.
Exactly. And a disruption there doesn't just make your gas more expensive, it spikes the electricity costs required to power the massive data centers driving the AI boom.
Right.
And over in Europe, Hungary's change in leadership signals a sudden pivot from Orban's historical foot-dragging on tech regulation.
Yeah.
So the EU can now push forward uniformly with its Digital Services Act and AI Act.
Okay, I look at the Strait of Hormuz like the extension cord for the global AI boom.
Oh, I like that.
Right. If you're running a massive server farm in Virginia and a geopolitical crisis trips over that cord in the Middle East, the power grid flickers. But let me push back on you here.
Sure.
Are we stretching to connect dots here? Like, is a naval blockade really a technology story, or are we just looking at everything through an AI lens because it's the trendiest topic in the briefings?
No, it's a fair question, but it absolutely is a tech story. The physical reality of artificial intelligence is fundamentally industrial. It is not like magic floating in a cloud.
Right, it's very physical.
Exactly. It requires silicon, vast cooling systems, and gigawatts of electricity. All of that is entirely dependent on predictable global logistics. When the price of oil spikes 40% in under a month and a half, the raw capital required to train a new frontier AI model absolutely skyrockets.
Which pulls us directly into the power-hungry reality of this AI arms race, because the costs are exploding, yet the advancements are moving faster than anyone predicted.
Yeah, Stanford University just released their 2024 to 2026 AI Index, and the data paints a picture of a dramatically shifting power balance.
So what's the big takeaway there?
The most glaring one is the narrowing gap between the United States and China.
Okay.
In January 2024, the top American AI model held a performance lead of over 9% compared to the top Chinese model.
Right.
But as of February 2026, Stanford reports that lead has evaporated down to just 1.7%.
Wow.
Yet China's DeepSeek R1 model is now consistently ranking among the most powerful systems on the globe.
And the raw capability of these systems is just leaping forward. The briefing mentions the SWE Bench verified coding benchmark jumping from a 60% success rate to near 100% in a single year.
Which is wild.
It is. And for those of you listening who aren't software engineers, the SWE Bench is essentially the ultimate automated coding test. You hand an AI a complex real-world bug buried in a massive software program, and you see if it can fix it without any human intervention.
Right.
Going from a failing grade to a perfect score in 12 months is just unheard of.
And that capability leap explains the record-breaking consumer adoption. I mean, Stanford found that 53% of the global population now uses generative AI in some capacity.
That's more than half the world.
Yeah, it reached that global saturation point faster than the personal computer, the smartphone, or the internet itself.
But, okay, here's the data point from the index that feels like a total paradox to me.
What's that?
The United States private sector invested $285.9 billion into AI in 2025. China's investment was just $12.4 billion. That is a massive Moneyball scenario. The U.S. is spending 23 times the money, over $250 billion. Yet China is stepping up to the plate and hitting just as many home runs on the performance benchmarks. How is that mechanically possible?
Well, it reveals two underlying realities. First, there are massive capital inefficiencies in the American approach, largely driven by the sheer cost of building out the physical infrastructure we just talked about.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, China has structurally optimized its ability to leverage open source research. They don't need to spend $200 billion discovering the new architecture if an American lab publishes a white paper on it. They simply take that architecture and optimize it locally.
And it's not just about capital, it's about people.
Right.
If the U.S. is spending $285.9 billion, why does the Stanford Index show that AI researcher migration to the U.S. has plummeted 89% since 2017? Where's all this elite talent actually going if they aren't coming to Silicon Valley?
So the talent pool is decentralizing. Researchers are staying in their home countries, or they're migrating to emerging tech hubs in the European Union and the Middle East.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they're following local governments that are heavily subsidizing sovereign AI initiatives, or they're seeking out environments with far less restrictive immigration and visa policies.
But despite that brain drain, the major U.S. tech giants are still spending astronomical sums to maintain their edge. I mean, Meta just announced their new model, Muse Spark.
Yes.
It's the first major release from their newly formed Meta Superintelligence Labs, which is being run by Alexandra Wang.
And Muse Spark is designed differently than massive server-based models. They are pitching it as small, fast, and highly capable of multimodal reasoning and agentic tasks.
Right, which means it doesn't just read text. Multimodal means it can see images, hear audio, and write code.
Exactly.
And agentic means it can actually execute a multi-step plan on your behalf. Meta is rolling this out everywhere across WhatsApp, Instagram, and baking it directly into the hardware of their Ray-Ban smart glasses.
And to support all of that, Meta's capital expenditures for 2026 are projected to be between $115 and $135 billion.
Just an insane amount of money.
It's nearly double what they spent the previous year. They are essentially conceding that the era of relying on their older llama models is over.
Because the competition is pulling away, the briefings show that Anthropic's Claude Opus 4.6 and Google's Gemini 3.1 Pro just crossed the 50% success mark on the hardest public logic benchmarks.
Right.
Just 1 year ago, those systems were scoring under 20%.
What's fascinating here is how this explosive technological progress is actually filtering down into the broader economy.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
We have fresh data from PwC and McKinsey indicating that 74% of AI's measurable economic value is currently being captured by just 20% of organizations.
I want to pause on that because for you listening right now, this directly impacts the corporate landscape you work in. Nearly 3/4 of the financial gains from the most powerful technology in human history are being hoarded by a tiny fraction of elite companies.
And the downstream effect on human capital is severe. A full third of organizations surveyed expect AI to actively shrink their workforce this year.
A third.
A third. They are specifically targeting reductions in service operations, supply chain management, and traditional software engineering. There is a massive widening gulf between the top 20% of firms wielding AI as a weapon and the vast majority of companies that are basically paralyzed in the pilot testing phase.
And if these models are advancing as rapidly as the Stanford numbers suggest, we have to look at what happens when the guardrails fail.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the intelligence briefings on the cyber threat landscape are, frankly, terrifying.
Yeah, Anthropic recently had to trigger what they termed a safety pause on a pre-release research model they named Mythos.
Right, and during internal red teaming, which is when a company hires hackers to intentionally try and break their own software, they discovered something really alarming.
Very alarming.
Mythos was autonomously discovering and exploiting zero-day vulnerabilities across every major operating system and web browser.
And, a zero-day vulnerability is a flaw in software that the creators don't know about yet. There are literally 0 days to fix it before it gets exploited.
Right.
Usually it takes a team of elite human hackers months to find just one of these. Mythos was finding them and weaponizing them entirely on its own without a human directing it.
I have to challenge the language here. Anthropic's PR department is calling this a safety pause. But if a lab engineers a piece of software that can autonomously infiltrate and compromise every operating system on the planet, haven't they basically just built a digital biological weapon?
Well, that is the core debate tearing through the cybersecurity community right now.
I bet.
When a generative AI model transitions from answering questions to autonomously discovering and hoarding zero-day exploits, it ceases to be a consumer product. It becomes a strategic, offensive munition.
And the terrifying part is that our current institutions are already failing to defend against human-driven attacks. Look at the critical Citrix NetScaler vulnerability highlighted in today's briefing. It's tracked as CVE 2026 3-year by 5.
Right. A Citrix NetScaler is basically a digital front door that companies use to let remote workers securely access the corporate network.
Okay.
This specific vulnerability has a severity score of 9.3 out of 10. It is disastrous.
The federal government's cybersecurity agency, CISA, issued a strict deadline to patch this back on April 2nd. But the briefings show it is still being actively exploited in the wild.
Oh.
Hackers are stealing administrator session IDs, walking right through that digital front door and taking over unpatched networks. And their primary targets, public schools and healthcare providers.
Right. And simultaneously in Canada, a highly organized campaign dubbed Storm 2755, or the Payroll Pirate Group, is financially crippling organizations.
Yeah.
They're gaining access to employee accounts through a technique known as MFA fatigue.
Okay, let's explain MFA fatigue because it relies entirely on human exhaustion.
Go for it.
You know, when you log into an account and your phone buzzes with a two-factor authentication request, attackers will trigger that alert on an employee's phone at 2 in the morning. And they'll trigger it again and again, 30, 40 times in a row.
It's relentless.
Exactly. Eventually, the bleary-eyed employee just hits approve so their phone will stop buzzing and they can go back to sleep. Once the attacker is in, they navigate to the HR portal and silently redirect the employee's direct deposit into a bank account they control.
And that kind of targeted social engineering is fueled by the massive data leaks happening in the background. I mean, a major European email provider just suffered a breach exposing over 40 million metadata records.
40 million?
Yeah. This includes communication logs from global entities like L'Oreal, Renault, and even the French embassy.
Now, the company claims the actual bodies of the emails weren't exposed, just the metadata, who sent the email, who received it, and the timestamp.
Right.
But think about the metadata, like an itemized phone bill. The hackers don't need an audio recording of your phone calls. If they have your bill, they know exactly who you talked to, what time you talked to them, and how often. They can map out an entire corporate hierarchy and build an incredibly precise profile on you just from the metadata.
Exactly. It provides the exact blueprint needed to launch highly convincing, targeted, spear-phishing attacks against executives.
And for you listening, these attacks aren't just happening to massive global corporations. They are hitting local communities. Just yesterday, Spring Lake Park schools in Minnesota had to indefinitely shut down all of their campuses due to a massive ransomware attack.
Every single digital service was locked.
Yeah.
No electronic grading, no automated bill schedules, no cafeteria payment systems. The entire district was forced completely offline.
And the briefing notes this is part of a 23% year-over-year increase in ransomware attacks specifically targeting the education sector.
It's a huge jump.
Which brings us to a massive societal intersection. We are seeing these highly advanced autonomous threats evolving in the wild, while our public institutions are struggling just to keep their lights on. How are schools and governments attempting to manage this technological wave for the next generation? Because looking at the legislative briefings, the education system is suffering from extreme whiplash.
We are witnessing a forceful legislative rollback. I mean, in 2026 alone, 16 separate states have introduced bills to legally mandate a reevaluation of screen time in K-12 classrooms.
Wow.
They're actively passing laws to remove tablet-based instruction for the youngest students.
Lawmakers are finally recognizing that forcing gamified digital reading apps onto 4-year-olds might have been a developmental mistake. And the cell phone bans that started a few years ago are now entering phase 2, where school districts are expanding the bans to specifically target smartwatches.
Right. But conversely, you look at New York City Public Schools, the largest district in the United States, and they're trying to integrate the technology through a highly structured new AI policy. They call it their red, yellow, green framework.
It dictates exactly how a teacher can use AI.
Yeah.
Green means full approval for administrative tasks, like drafting a basic email to parents or brainstorming lesson plans. Red means strictly prohibited. A teacher cannot use AI to grade student essays, they cannot use it to determine behavioral discipline, and they absolutely cannot use it to draft individualized education plans for students with disabilities.
Which is a crucial boundary.
Right. And yellow requires a human in the loop. If an AI analyzes district-wide student data trends, a trained professional has to manually review the output before any action is taken.
And at the highest level of governance, the international community is attempting to build similar frameworks. The United Nations Independent International Scientific Panel on AI recently convened its first in-person summit. They modeled this panel loosely on the IPCC, the group that handles global climate change data. Their mandate is to assess how artificial intelligence is going to cross national borders and fundamentally alter global labor, military security, and economic development.
So, what does this all mean?
This raises an important question, especially when you recall the economic data we discussed earlier. If 74% of the economic gains from this technology are being captured by just 20% of the companies, what exactly are our K-12 schools preparing students for?
Right.
Are we training them to work at those elite AI-wielding firms? Or are we preparing them for the vast majority of companies that are paralyzed and shrinking their workforce?
It looks like a complete split personality crisis in our education system.
Seriously.
On one hand, society is telling kids that they must master AI to survive in a hyper-competitive winner-take-all economy. But on the other hand, we are passing state laws to rip iPads out of their hands in kindergarten. Are these rollback policies genuinely protecting children's cognitive development, or are they just creating a wider, insurmountable gap between the students who have unlimited access to frontier tech at home and the students who rely entirely on the public school system for their digital literacy?
That is the defining educational challenge of this decade. If public school systems completely abandon technology in the name of safety, the only young adults who will know how to wield these tools in the workforce will be the ones whose families could afford to teach them privately.
It is a heavy reality for us to sit with. Between naval blockades threatening power grids, AI autonomously hacking networks, and this looming crisis in our schools, the briefings today are intense. But as we promised at the start, we always want to leave you with a different perspective.
Definitely.
Something genuinely worth smiling about.
And the final brief today certainly delivers that.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Last Friday, the Artemis II crew splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean after a historic 10-day mission. Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen.
4 astronauts who just returned from a journey that took them farther from our home planet than any human beings have ever traveled in history.
On April 6th, the Artemis capsule reached a distance of 248,655 miles from Earth. They shattered the record set by the Apollo 13 crew 55 years ago.
It's amazing.
This was the very first crewed flight beyond low Earth orbit since 1972. It was the first lunar flyby to include a woman, the first to include a Black astronaut, and the very first time a Canadian citizen has ever flown beyond the moon's orbit.
The visual details from the recovery are just incredible. 4 exhausted but smiling explorers, their capsule bobbing in the waters of the Pacific, while an entire new generation of kids watches people who look like them return from the dark side of the moon.
It is genuinely breathtaking.
But, if we connect this profound human achievement to the broader technological narrative we've been unpacking today, it leaves us with a highly provocative thought to consider.
What's that?
We are currently pouring billions into building autonomous AI that is on the verge of handling all our terrestrial logistics, writing our software code, and managing our corporate cyber defenses. We are terrified about screen time and humans being replaced at their office desks. But perhaps humanity's true long-term role isn't sitting in a cubicle managing digital data at all.
Oh, wow.
Right. If artificial intelligence can fully inherit and manage the digital realm, will its ultimate legacy be that it frees humans from our screens entirely? Will this technology be the catalyst that allows us to get back into physical capsules, to push the boundaries of human endurance, and return to our roots as physical explorers of the universe?
Wow. Think about that. Instead of AI trapping us inside the machine, it might be the exact tool that cuts the extension cord, releasing us from our desks and setting us free to explore the physical universe.
Yeah, right.
That is an incredible thought to leave you with today. Keep questioning the systems around you, stay deeply curious, and remember to look up. We will catch you on the next deep dive.